My name is Penelope Hayes, 41 years old, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Hayes Manufacturing Group, a precision machining company my father built from scratch over 40 years ago in Michigan. I grew up to the sound of grinding metal, spending afternoons in the factory watching my dad shake hands with workers like they were family. To me, Hayes Group isn't just a job, it's in my blood, a legacy, and a promise I made to my mother before she passed. I've been married to Adam Walker for 16 years, a man I once believed was my life partner, someone who stood beside me in every ambition, big or small. With his calm presence, sharp mind, and the way he always seemed 3 steps ahead, he convinced me he was the only one who truly understood my dream of carrying on the family business. After we got married, my father had Adam start from a mid-level operations management position in the company. "If you want to go far, you need to know the roots," he said. Adam didn't object. On the contrary, he was diligent, quick to learn, and knew how to win over both employees and board members. We became a well-regarded power couple. I was the CFO, Adam the COO, united in steering the business and raising our twins, Max and Lily, who earned scholarships at a prestigious private school. Everything seemed perfect, until that fateful night. Our 16th wedding anniversary coincided with the 45th anniversary of the company's founding. It was a major event held right at our estate, the home where Adam, the kids, and I had lived for years. The same place that had seen countless family dinners and late-night planning sessions with my father during times of financial crisis. I had spent nearly 3 weeks preparing for the event. Every white orchid, every crystal set on the table was hand-picked. It was meant to honor employees, partners, the board, and everyone who had supported the company through nearly half a century. And for me, as a daughter and a wife, it was my chance to thank those who believed in my leadership. Adam texted that he'd be arriving a little late, said he had a special surprise for the evening. I didn't suspect anything. I imagined a heartfelt speech, warm laughter, and touching moments. Until he walked in. And he wasn't alone. A woman I had never seen before was by his side. She was at least 10 years younger than me, with neat waves of blonde hair and a form-fitting red dress that left no room for misinterpretation. Her hand rested on Adam's arm like it had belonged there forever. And Adam, he didn't hide it. The way he looked at her was full of pride. When he saw me, he nodded, like I was the event coordinator, not his wife, not the mother of the children he had abandoned that night. "Penelope, come here, I want you to meet Savannah." Adam's voice rang clearly through the hall. "Savannah and I are starting a new chapter together." I froze. Eyes turned, whispers spread, glasses clinked awkwardly. Friends, colleagues, even longtime employees who had called me Mrs. Hayes suddenly went silent, no one daring to step forward. Adam walked closer, took Savannah's hand, and without a trace of shame declared, "Starting today, Savannah will be my partner in the company, and in this family." I heard every word, like scissors slicing through the portrait of the family I'd fought to preserve. He hadn't just brought his mistress to our anniversary celebration, he'd announced she was replacing me, in front of everyone, inside the very house where I was raised. But what he didn't know was that my father, the founder of the company, still held one last card. And he brought it with him that night. In an old leather briefcase, beneath what looked like commemorative documents, was the truth that would decide who really had the authority to determine the future of Hayes Group. And for the first time in years, I was ready to stand my ground. I met Adam Walker while we were both pursuing our MBAs at Northwestern University. I was a 26-year-old woman buried in a demanding schedule and the looming responsibility of inheriting the family business, something I could never avoid. He was different. Adam didn't come from privilege, but he had a way of making things feel simple. Warm, composed, and considerate, he felt like a breeze in the middle of a battlefield. Adam knew I was the only child of Franklin Hayes, the founder of Hayes Manufacturing Group, a primary supplier of precision parts for the aviation and agriculture industries across the Midwest. But unlike the others who saw me as a shortcut to success, Adam never once mentioned the company in our early conversations. Instead, he asked about my favorite coffee, whether I'd ever thought about studying in France, and why I always carried a worn leather notebook with me. I told him it was my mother's, the one where she had written notes on ethical business, on treating employees like family. Adam listened, nodded, and said something that stayed with me. You can learn how to make money, but integrity? That's something you bring from home. We got married a year later when I turned 27. The wedding took place in the garden behind our estate. During his speech, my father, a man both firm and deeply sentimental, choked up when he said, "Today this company doesn't just have a successor, but a true partner." True to his word, Adam began working at Hayes Group as a production supervisor. Even with his top-tier MBA, he didn't object to wearing safety goggles, spending hours on the factory floor, and learning how every machine and worker contributed. I thought I was truly lucky. Adam wasn't just a supportive husband, he made me believe that our family business could step into a new era without losing its core values. He was diligent, punctual, respectful to everyone from the lead engineer to the night security guard. When I was promoted to CFO at 33, Adam became COO, overseeing operations and logistics. The board admired him, the workers respected him, and my father, never one to praise lightly, often nodded in quiet approval during quarterly reviews. When the twins, Max and Lily, were born the year I turned 35, Adam proposed expanding maternity leave for female workers, a move that won unanimous support. "If you want loyal employees," he said in a meeting, "show them that their families matter too." He echoed exactly what my mother had written in her old notebook. For years, Adam was the picture-perfect husband, the ideal executive. He took the kids to school, attended every parent-teacher conference, never missed a piano recital or a basketball game. But now, looking back on those years, I can't help but wonder how much of it was real and how much of it was just a performance. Because there were small details I had overlooked. The strange phone calls on weekends he claimed were from international clients, the canceled family camping trips due to urgent production crises, while his social media showed him checked in at a resort in Palm Springs, the uneasy glances from junior staff when I asked about the special projects he was supposedly leading. I ignored it all. I made excuses. He was busy, his role was expanding, the pressure growing. I was busy too, I understood, I trusted him. The man I once held hands with and promised we'd never let work destroy what we had. I trusted him. Until that anniversary night, when Adam walked in with Savannah. A woman who wasn't just set to replace me in our home, but also in the office where I had once sat, among the very team I had led. And he dared to declare in front of everyone, "Savannah will be my partner in running this company and in raising our children." I didn't protest, no tears, no shouting. But inside, something began to fracture. Layer upon layer of memory started crumbling. One simple question echoed in my mind. Had it all been calculated from the beginning? I didn't have all the answers that night. But one thing became clear. From that moment on, I would not walk blindly anymore. After Adam was officially appointed Chief Operating Officer of Hayes Manufacturing early last year, he began to change, not abruptly, but subtly, gradually, like a thin film of dust settling over a painting that once sparkled. It started small. He suggested rebranding the company's image, meaning replacing the old signage with expensive LED boards and moving the main office from the production site to a more luxurious commercial district. "Big clients don't want to walk into a place that looks like a machine shop from the 1980s, he said in a board meeting, half smiling, half mocking. I stayed silent, partly because I thought he had a point, partly because I didn't want conflict. Then came the hired executive image consultant. I hadn't even fully grasped what that meant before Adam showed up in tailored suits, a new Swiss watch, and gently suggested I try something more youthful. "We are the face of the company, Penelope," he stressed. "You can't keep wearing cardigans and flats. You look like a philosophy professor, not the CFO." I swallowed my response, but inside something stirred. Not quite anger, not quite sorrow. Adam spent more time at golf clubs, private dinners with potential investors, and out-of-state conferences. When he missed Max's birthday party or Lily's piano recital, he compensated with flashy gifts. The newest iPhone, limited edition sneakers, remote-controlled aircrafts. The kids were thrilled. I saw only masks being swapped in place of presence. Gradually, I stopped getting invited to strategy meetings. When I asked, Adam would laugh. "Aren't you overloaded already? I just want you to rest." Dressed, right? Then whispers reached me from the tech team. All reports now had to go through Adam's assistant, not me. Projects I used to oversee were quietly reassigned to people with better market insight. I tried to stay calm. Maybe Adam was modernizing our structure. Maybe this was just a phase. That's what I told myself. Until one night I opened the wrong file. It was a Friday evening. Adam was away on a business trip in New York. I needed employee cost data for a meeting with our tax advisor. Adam's personal laptop was still open, mid-email. The subject line read, "Preliminary merger agreement with Ravelton Industrial." Ravelton. The name sent a chill down my spine. Ravelton Industrial had been our fiercest competitor for 2 decades, a massive conglomerate known for buying up family-owned companies, dismantling old management structures, selling off pieces and outsourcing production overseas. I opened the attachment. Adam wasn't just in secret talks with Revolton. He had listed Hayes as a fully transferable asset, projecting post-merger revenue would increase by 120% through staff cuts, asset liquidation, and selling surplus real estate. I scanned the list. Names of workers who'd been with us for over a decade lumped into one cold sentence. Current labor force, up to 70% reduction feasible. I couldn't breathe. I scrambled to check related emails. Nearly 80 exchanges between Adam and a name I hadn't once suspected. Savannah Hart. She wasn't just the mistress. She was a corporate restructuring consultant, a predator. And Adam had given her access to Hayes Group's internal data, collaborating with her to manipulate board votes, and temporarily replace Penelope due to ongoing health concerns. I had to read it 3 times. Adam was plotting to remove me from the board by fabricating a mental health issue. He planned to exploit a temporary proxy clause the board had approved last year, intended to ensure operations during emergencies when a member became incapacitated. I collapsed at the desk. For a moment I couldn't tell where personal betrayal ended and professional sabotage began. They blurred into each other. A black tide crashing over every memory, every night I waited up for him, every text that said, "Still in a meeting, love you." For the first time in my life I knew what it meant to be erased from the very life I had built. But I also knew this. I was no longer the MBA student who once sat wide-eyed listening to Adam talk about business ethics. He forgot one thing. I am the daughter of Franklin Hayes, the man who built Hayes Group, not to be sold. And from that moment on, I knew I would not let it all collapse quietly. I didn't sleep at all that night. The screen stayed on, the documents open, but I remained still. My heart didn't ache like a betrayed wife's anymore. What surged through me was something colder. The realization that I, the rightful heir, stood at the edge of losing everything, simply because I trusted the wrong man. At 5 a.m. I sent my father a single message. "I need to see you. As soon as possible. It's about the company." Less than a minute later, his reply appeared. 7 a.m. Office at the main plant, I'll be there. 2 hours later I stepped into the room I'd called the strategy room since I was a child, the place where my father used to meet with financial advisors, lead engineers, and our core leadership team. The room had never changed. Exposed red brick walls, a thick wooden table, and a whiteboard still marked with notes from last month's training session. Franklin Hayes stood beside the table, both hands resting on an old dark leather briefcase. When he saw me enter, he didn't bother with small talk. "You figured it out," he said, his voice gravelly but firm. I nodded. "And I need to know if there's any way to stop it." He wasn't surprised. In fact, there was something in his eyes, a quiet relief. Maybe he'd been waiting for me to see it. Maybe he'd known all along. "I started having doubts last year," he said, pulling out a neatly clipped folder. "Not because Adam was treating you differently, but because of the decisions he pushed through. Accelerating overseas expansion, quietly altering confidentiality clauses, and adding someone named Savannah Hart to the strategic advisory list without running it through the CFO. He slid the folder across to me. Inside was everything I needed. Reports from our family's private legal advisor. Notes from calls between Adam and Revolton's representative. Internal records showing Adam's proposed changes to the proxy voting terms, none of which had been legally approved. I looked up, stunned. Dad, how long have you been tracking this? Longer than you'd think, he replied. But I didn't want you facing the truth until you were ready. Now you are, aren't you? I nodded. So, if I never sign those documents, Adam's voting authority isn't valid? Not only is it invalid, my father said, it would violate company bylaws if he tried to push through a sale without majority control. He pulled out one last stack of papers. You remember the Hayes Group share class structure, right? I nodded. Class A and Class B. Class A is the founding equity, each share carries 10 votes. Class B is operational equity, each share carries only 1 vote. Exactly. You currently hold 21% of Class A shares, the ones I transferred to you 5 years ago. I hold 39%. This morning, I signed over the remaining 30% of my Class A shares to you. The documents have been notarized and filed with the state registrar. I went speechless. Dad, that means you now control 51% of the Class A shares, full voting control. I gently placed my hand on the folder, afraid it might vanish if I didn't hold on. In that moment, I didn't feel triumph or revenge. I felt clarity. I wasn't alone anymore. My mother's legacy, my grandfather's dream, and the futures of over 500 employees now rested on me standing up for what's rightfully ours. My father looked at me for a long moment. Adam thinks he holds all the cards, but he forgot something. At Hayes Group, the person with the final say is never the one who shouts the loudest. It's the one who quietly carries the heaviest burden. I smiled slightly. No more tears, no more shaking. What's the plan for tonight? I asked. He smirked. Tonight Adam will stand before everyone, the board, shareholders, senior employees, and even the kids, and confidently announce what he calls a new era. And when he finishes that grand speech, I continued, I'll stand up, declare the legal ownership, and end the show. My father looked at me the way he must have looked at my mother, the woman he trusted more than anyone on earth. Penelope, ready. And I knew, this time, I didn't need anyone to speak on my behalf. That evening, our estate sparkled with lights like it did for every major Hayes Group celebration. On the perfectly trimmed lawn, tables dressed in white linen and crystal glassware glimmered beneath strands of light draped through ancient oak trees. The whole property buzzed with laughter, champagne corks, and cheerful toasts, none of them aware they were about to witness the biggest shift in the company's history. I stepped out of the dressing room in a soft blue dress, the same one my mother wore to the company's 25th anniversary. Simple, modest, but unmistakably strong. I stood before the mirror, took a deep breath. No more fear, no more hesitation. Tonight I wasn't the betrayed wife. I was the true heir of this company. Adam arrived 15 minutes late, hand in hand with Savannah Hart, the woman he had the audacity to bring into the very home I'd grown up in. She wore a blazing red dress, her calculating smile undisguised, walking confidently under hundreds of curious eyes. Savannah will be seated at the executive table with me, he announced loudly, ensuring those around heard. She helped finalize the agreement we're about to present. I smiled calmly. I'm sure everyone here will be very curious. The dinner proceeded as usual. Dishes were served one by one, soft music floated between conversations, but I could feel the tension tightening like a string. My father, Franklin, sat one seat away, giving me a slight nod when I looked over. That familiar leather briefcase rested in his hand. As dessert was served, Adam stood, tapping his glass. His voice rang with practiced confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. We're not just celebrating 45 years of Hayes Group. This marks the beginning of a brand new chapter. He pressed the remote. A projector screen dropped, revealing the logo of Revolton Industrial next to Hayes Group. A ripple of murmurs spread from the back tables. After many months of negotiation, I, as COO and the designated proxy for the CEO when necessary, have signed a preliminary agreement to merge Hayes Group into the Revolton Industrial System. This is a globally strategic move. Adam paused, then turned towards Savannah. And I'd like to introduce Savannah Hart, a corporate restructuring specialist who has partnered with me throughout this process. She will be leading the transition. Savannah stood and gave a polite nod amidst scattered applause and a sea of confused stares. Adam looked in my direction, a faint smirk curling at the corner of his lips. Penelope, would you like to say a few words before we sign the memorandum and move forward together? I rose slowly, letting my eyes rest on every face in the room, from longtime directors to logistics staff I'd chatted with in the cafeteria. They were all waiting to see how I'd react. They expected a fight, a meltdown, but I didn't give Adam the satisfaction. I believe, I said calmly, the person who should speak now is my father. Mr. Franklin Hayes, founder of Hayes Group and current chairman of the board. A wave of surprise rippled through the room. My father stood, tall, composed, and entirely in control. Thank you, Penelope. He glanced around the room, then locked eyes with Adam. I've listened to Adam's presentation, quite compelling. But before anyone believes this is a finalized deal, I have a few clarifications to make. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. First, regarding the proxy authority Adam mentioned, that clause was never officially approved. As chairman, I withheld my signature due to potential conflict of interest. That means Adam does not have the authority to act on behalf of the CEO in major strategic decisions. The room went silent. Adam's face turned pale. Second, my father continued, on ownership and voting rights. Today, I formally declare that Penelope Hayes holds 51% of Class A shares, each share carrying 10 voting rights. Adam Walker, in contrast, owns only Class B shares, which carry limited voting power. Any sale, merger, or structural changes require approval from the majority shareholder. He turned to the board, and as you can see, that majority is no longer Adam. The murmurs turned into a wave of stunned disbelief. Third, he lifted another document. I have proof that Adam Walker and Savannah Hart exchanged internal information with Revolton Industrial without the board's authorization, an act that may constitute breach of fiduciary duty and violation of non-disclosure agreements. Savannah slowly sat down. Adam clenched his fists, but every gaze in the room had shifted to me. I stepped beside my father, and I state clearly before everyone here, Hayes Group is not for sale, not in the hands of those who don't understand its true value. The room was dead silent. Then, applause broke out. First from the row of technical staff, then spreading across the entire hall. People who had hesitated before now stood and clapped louder. It wasn't applause for me. It was for the fairness that should have never been in question. Adam said nothing. He knew it was over. And I knew this was only the beginning. The applause still echoed in the hall as I returned to my seat. Adam stared at me, his gaze shifting from panic to bitterness, but he had nothing left to cling to. Everything was out in the open now. Savannah had already let go of his hand the moment my father revealed the confidentiality breach. Now she looked down, avoiding every eye in the room, including Adam's. Penelope, you can't do this. This isn't just about you, Adam hissed through clenched teeth. I looked him straight in the eye, steady and cold. No, Adam, it was never just about you or me. This is about the 500+ people whose livelihoods depend on this company, about the values 3 generations of my family bled to build, and about my 2 children, who deserve to see the truth. He opened his mouth, but stopped as my father stepped forward, his voice low and firm. I think it's time for you to leave, now. Adam looked around. No one stood with him. Board members averted their eyes. Veteran staff stayed quiet. And those who used to flatter him took a step back. Savannah was the first to rise. Not a word, not a glance back, she walked straight toward the door. Adam lingered for a few more seconds, then turned, his designer suit still sharp in crease but devoid of dignity. As he disappeared through the wooden doors, a weight that had lingered on my shoulders for months finally lifted. I didn't feel triumphant. Just light. So light I nearly cried. But I couldn't fall apart. Not now. I turned and looked toward the table where Max and Lily sat, their faces tight with tension, their eyes full of questions. I walked over, knelt between them, and gently held their hands. I'm sorry you had to see that, I said softly, careful not to deepen the wound with my words. Your father made some very bad choices. not just to me, but to the company and the people we've built this with. Lily looked at me, her eyes glassy but steady, just like my mother's when she was angry but composed. Dad lied to us, didn't he? The gifts, the promises, they were just to turn us against you? I nodded, unable to deny it. Max gripped my hand tighter. Are you still in charge of the company? I smiled gently. Not just in charge, I own it. And I promise to protect it. Not for me, but for your future. Max looked over at Lily. They both nodded, no words needed. As guests began to leave, many came to shake my hand, genuine handshakes. Some thanked me, some just gave a quiet squeeze and a nod, but I knew exactly what it meant. They were staying, they still believed. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting with the executive team. Not to assign blame, but to restore order. Starting today, I stated clearly, we will conduct a full audit of all policies enacted in the past 12 months. Every change concerning personnel, benefits, merger agreements, or restructuring will be reviewed point by point, transparently and publicly. I saw the relief in many people's eyes. I continued, Hayes Group wasn't built just to generate profit. It was built to support a community, and we will not sacrifice that for anyone. No one objected, not a single murmur, only firm nods. That afternoon, I received a call from Adam's lawyer. He officially resigned from the board and agreed to relinquish all claims to executive control. Partly because there was nothing left to claim, and partly because the law no longer stood with him. 3 days later, local media began covering a stunning reversal in Michigan's family-run manufacturing sector. They praised me as a strong, decisive woman, but I knew, without my father, without timely clarity, I would have lost everything. I stood alone in the office my mother once used, the afternoon sun filtering through the blinds, casting light on a black and white photo of my grandparents operating their first small workshop. I gently placed my hand on that photo. I did it, Mom, I whispered. And I knew, this time, no one would ever take that place from me. Not in this company, not in my life. A week after that night, the atmosphere in our house felt entirely different. No more Adam's phone ringing off the hook. No more rushed footsteps of assistants. No more voices from strategy meetings I had always been excluded from. Instead, there was Max giggling with Lily in the kitchen, my father conversing with the legal team in the library, and the quiet steadiness in my own heart, like an antique clock finally ticking in sync again. I stood in the garden, my mother's favorite retreat. The April breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and apple blossoms. That soft fragrance always reminded me of her, the woman who once told me, value doesn't come from applause. It comes from how you protect what's right when no one is watching. Adam thought he could replace me. He brought Savannah into the company, introduced her as his new partner, not just in business but in family. He scripted it like I was the outdated chapter to be closed, the shadow to fade behind the curtain. But what he never understood was I was never just the COO's wife. I was the woman who grew up in that factory, who learned to distinguish steel grades by touch, who spent hours beside my mother learning how to balance payroll so every employee got a Christmas bonus, even in down years. And when Adam confidently stepped on that stage, believing a slideshow and a few prepared lines could erase 3 generations of Hayes family legacy, my father stood up. Not with force, but with truth. He didn't have to shout or threaten. Just a few documents, a nod from our attorney, and a single look at me, steady, as if to say, you're next. Now it's your time to stand tall. I did it. Not for glory, not for revenge, but to remind everyone, and myself, that my place was never defined by a title or a marriage. It was defined by the fact that I am the one who protects something greater, a legacy. That night, after the guests had all left, I sat on the front steps of the porch, a cup of warm tea in my hands that Lily had made for me. Max came to sit beside me, silent for a while, then asked softly, "Are you sad, Mom, about Dad?" I looked at my son, a boy nearly my height with eyes more like my mother's than anyone else's, and answered honestly, "Yes, Max. But I don't regret anything." He nodded, then leaned his head on my shoulder. "You know what? I used to think Dad was the strongest person I knew, but now I think, the real strong one is you. I gently squeezed his hand. No one teaches you how to be a mother in a situation like this. But I knew one thing clearly. If there was anything I could pass down to Max and Lily, it was truth and integrity, even if that came with pain. 3 days later, my father and I officially announced the restructuring strategy for Hayes Group. Not to sell out to globalization as Adam once claimed, but to increase sustainability, reinforce company culture, and expand training programs for veteran employees. This time, our consultants weren't flashy firms from Chicago, but trusted advisors who had stood with us since the beginning. At the first all-hands meeting after the fallout, I stood before more than 300 employees and said, "I'm not here to prove I'm the best. I'm here to make one thing clear. This company is not a brand, it's people. It's every single day of effort from those of you sitting here, and I'm here to protect that." There wasn't thunderous applause, but I saw it in their eyes. The trust was back. That evening, I stayed late in the office, the one that had been Adam's for the past 2 years. I rearranged everything, took down the cold abstract art, brought back the photo of my grandparents, placed it next to my mother's portrait. On the desk, I laid an old, dark leather notebook, its cover worn but still legible. My mother had once written inside, "Leadership isn't control, it's the courage to speak when others choose silence." I closed the notebook and looked out the large window, where the sunset bathed the Michigan sky in a golden-orange hue. This time, no one would mistake where I belonged. The story of Penelope Hayes is a powerful reminder that true worth doesn't come from titles, appearances, or surface-level relationships, but from the strength to protect what's right in the face of chaos. In real life, there are women who quietly carry the weight of family, legacy, and ethics. Not because they're weak, but because they choose resilient strength. Betrayal may wound us, but no one can take away the integrity we've built over a lifetime. What do you think about Penelope's decision? Would you have done the same in her shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, real-life stories that inspire.